when it comes to protecting our life in self-defense, we have to count the cost, and I want to look at three things in particular. Stick around. It's a beautiful day, and I'm out here enjoying some scenery and the river here in my hometown. I'm right in the middle of the city, and it's a bit of a windy day, so I apologize in advance for some of the background noise. To everything worthwhile, there's usually some cost involved. The ability to defend yourself and your loved ones is definitely something that's worthwhile, and there are plenty of costs associated to that reality. You're probably watching this video because you're interested in this subject and because you're interested in knowing how to defend yourself. So consider this part of your mental training, which leads to my first point and the first cost that we need to consider, and that is the cost of training. The idea or the desire to be able to defend ourselves is one thing, but training to do so is another. And this training can be costly because there's multiple elements to it. For one, we've got to invest in physical fitness training because you're not going to be able to respond effectively if there's no physicality about you. So this cost may be the cost of a gym membership. It may be the cost of time out of your schedule to keep your body fit and strong and able. If you've ever been in a fight, you know that it's one of the most physically demanding things that you can do. There's the cost and time that goes into buying self-protection tools and learning how to use them. There's the cost and time that goes into learning how to fight, understanding a base level of striking, grappling, wrestling, the use of weaponry, and all of these things. I don't know what this looks like for you, but you have to take the journey of learning how to fight. You have to partner up with the right people and gain an understanding, and then be willing to train these things regularly. Maybe this looks like joining a martial arts training center in your area. But just remember, there's a big difference between martial arts competition and real world combatives. Look at the time you're spending right now watching videos like this, trying to get educated on these subjects. All of that goes into the cost of training. Nothing will test our skill like the stage. I grew up doing music most of my life. I grew up doing martial arts, and I was constantly on a stage of performance. And the thing that made the difference on the stage was the hours of training that went into it. The stage without training is a nightmare. And the stage of real life combat's going to require hours of preparation if we're to thrive instinctively in that chaotic, unpredictable environment. So friend, embrace the cost of training. Number two, there's the cost of response. In a recent video, I spoke about the importance of acceptance and commitment if forced to fight. The cost of response is real because so many people freeze up. They fear present and future implications, and this fear is wise, but it is a cost because in many cases, the cost of not responding is worse than the cost of responding. The third cost is bearing the weight of the aftermath, especially if it's a serious situation. Does carrying a firearm and carrying around blades and self-protection tools make me feel more confident? Absolutely. But if I ever have to use these things, my life is going to change. Have you accepted the fact that your life could change entirely if you're in one of these situations? Have you? Because a lot of people, I don't think, have really taken time to think about the implications of what they're carrying around every day. But the cost of accepting the aftermath is the cost of accepting whatever fate comes to us in order to protect ourselves and the ones we love the most. It's easy to feel confident walking around with that EDC pistol, but it's not so easy to be confident standing in a courtroom not knowing how things are going to turn out. A lot of innocent people went to jail, unfortunately. You got to prepare your mind for these things ahead of time, because if you're committed to your self-defense, if you've trained for it, if you've committed to the response, you're going to have to be committed to the aftermath, whatever that looks like. It's something that happens here before you ever get there. I did a video a while back on the aftermath of having to use lethal force in self-defense. I'll try to include that in the description for you because it goes along well with this video. When we think about the reality of the aftermath, it really causes us to understand the importance of good situational awareness and being able to prevent things in advance or to be able to avoid situations to begin with. But it's common sense to understand that no matter how hard we try to avoid situations, we may be one of those unfortunate individuals that's in a situation beyond our will and forced to act. If you're in those situations, it's my heart's desire that you would be committed to training, committed to responding if need be, and committed to the aftermath. If you want to be a defender, if you want to be a protector, count the cost, my friend. But when I think about the evil people that's in this world, it's a cost I'm personally willing to count, because the cost of not counting it is worse, in my personal opinion. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this was helpful. Take care.
the entire time you have been charged with a very serious criminal offense. We're the Armed Attorneys. Today we're talking about why, even if you win your self-defense case, you have still lost. Stick around to the end on our pro tip on how to avoid losing 100% of the time. And before we get started, please show your support for the Second Amendment by hitting the like button.
And to start off the conversation, we have to return to this principle, and we've discussed this in the past, about what a legal justification is. Because I think a lot of people have the misapprehension that if I defend myself, save my life, save my family, save a loved one, that, that's it. We're all done here.
No crime committed, no problem.
Yes,
Yep.
and unfortunately, that's just not the case, because when we say justification, what we're talking about is your conduct would otherwise be a crime, but it's okay because you had to defend yourself, you had to save your life, somebody kicked down your door in the middle of the night. We have all these different scenarios, and so because we go back to that base general rule that what you're doing is a crime, pointing a gun at someone, generally a crime, pulling the trigger, shooting somebody, killing somebody, running someone over your car, those are all general crimes. But sometimes it's okay when we're fighting for our life, and so because of that, people get charged with a crime.
Yeah, and because self-defense, defense of others, defense of habitation, all of these, justifications are what we call plea and abatements. You have to admit that you committed the crime in order to get the defense. So
you can't say, I didn't do it, but if I did, then it was self-defense.
Exactly. So you have to say, yes, I committed the crime of aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. I committed the crime of, manslaughter or murder. But this is why.
There's a comma, but.
Comma, but.
Yeah.
But, so it really does. And once you admit those elements, and particularly the more polarized self-defense and, the Second Amendment generally gets, the more often you are going to have, police officers, prosecutors who just say, aha, we got you. And now we're looking at, you really do have to prove that justification, not just in the courtroom. It's not a matter of showing up once and telling the judge, and the judge says, case dismissed, because judges typically don't have that power, right? That's a very common misconception. So it's showing up every single month in court with everything we're going to talk about in just a moment that comes with that, and then finally arguing your justification to a jury. This probably happens 2+ years after the incident itself. The entire time you have been charged with a very serious criminal offense.
Yeah, and so to answer that age-old question of if I defend myself, can I get arrested or sued? The answer to both of those questions is yes. You can be charged with a crime, just as Emily was describing. And then we have this kind of second or double whammy where you can get sued civilly. So in Emily's example, it's the government, it's the state or the Commonwealth, or, wherever you are, trying to deprive you of your freedom or your liberty because they think what you did was wrong, essentially. Or, you're left in that position of having to persuade your peers that what you did was right. But then on the other side, we have individuals, family members, maybe it's the living relatives of the person that you ended up having to kill to save your own life, suing you for damages. And so we see a lot of costs incurred on both sides. What are some costs that you see associated with a criminal charge?
Sure. So you're going to be arrested. You're going to have to bond out of jail.
Yeah, a lot of states have bond.
That is a gigantic expense. So let's say, I think we could just average at, a very serious felony bond is about $50,000.
Yeah.
Of course, it varies county by county, state by state, charge by charge. But that's $5,000 typically, if you assume about a 10% down. $5,000 out of your pocket, number one. Number two, you're hiring an attorney for your criminal case, which, for these kind of charges, I would say...
Let's say not involving death, because I'd say the two big expenses are, the price differences. Was somebody hurt or was somebody killed?
Yeah. If not involving death, I don't know, what, 15 to 30 grand probably is what you're looking at. But then you're going to have to take off work once a month to head to court. You're going to have to just take the time to check in with your bondsman, maybe every single day.
Yep.
Check in with pretrial, right? You're going to have to go pee in a cup pretty regularly, which just requires you taking off work randomly
or
to
you
go
might
do.
lose your job even.
Yeah, and if you lose your job, you're not getting a new one while you're charged with a felony offense. That's just not how employers work. If they run backgrounds, you are not getting a new job. And then what do you do for money over the course of this several years?
Right.
It is tough. Then imagine you go to trial and there's an additional trial fee with your your attorney because attorneys don't try cases for free. And like, what if you need an expert witness, right?
Well, and I'll throw in one more thing, because the scenario that Emily just laid out was if the person didn't die.
Right.
Now, what do you think? Is it a significant price difference if there's a dead body?
Absolutely. I mean, dead bodies will get you 6-figure attorney's fees every single time.
Yeah.
So.
And then, so that's half of the equation. And now we move over to the civil system. And a lot of states have the same justification. And hopefully, at the end of the day, going back to Emily's example, you did everything right. Your actions were reasonable and immediately necessary. Most states follow some sort of pattern like that. And you're acquitted, right? Do you get paid back your attorney's fees?
No.
Do you get paid for the time you had to take off work or lost wages? And so, in that scenario, even if you win the criminal charge, you've lost.
Yeah. Well, and not to mention, more and more these days, gun cases are extraordinarily high profile. So let's say that let's say you're the richest man in the world and all of those hundreds of thousands of dollars didn't really ding your pocketbook, but your face, I mean, think about Kyle Rittenhouse, right? Yeah. Like your face has been plastered over at least your local media, maybe national media. Half the country thinks you're a cold-blooded murderer. I mean, what do you do? I mean, even if you're ultimately acquitted, I mean, how many of the people who hated Rittenhouse from the start still think he's a murderer and hate him even after acquittal? All of the 100% of them. No one who started the equation that guy is guilty of murder said, well, okay, the jury said no. They all had something else to say about it.
And so, we made it out of the criminal system, but now we have the second half of the equation, which is the civil system. And, just like there's justification in criminal cases, a lot of states have, laws on the books that say, if your conduct was justified, then maybe some have an immunity to getting sued. I would say an intermediate is maybe you're immune from damages. And some states say, no, we're just going to look at a comparative analysis and how much, each party was at fault. And so we have all these different calculations, but it still doesn't keep the person from having to respond, from hiring a lawyer, and unlike the criminal system where they're seeking to deprive you of your liberty, now we're looking at, big dollar signs in the civil world.
And I think it's important to remember that the civil jurisprudence world is user driven. So when someone files a lawsuit against you, there's no one sitting there at the clerk's office saying, oh, no, this lawsuit isn't valid.
Right.
It gets filed and you get served and you have to hire an attorney. And then that attorney has to tell the court system, whoa, guys, and this is just assuming the best case scenario, which is that there is a defense to the suit itself, which is more rare than anything else.
Yeah.
You still have to go move for that suit to be dismissed. Yeah. So it still takes time. You still got to answer the lawsuit, hire an attorney, and work that process out in the best case scenario.
Yeah. But, we've talking about best case scenario. Even then, just like Emily said, even when they say you can't be sued for this, you still have to respond. You really can still be sued for it. And so going to the criminal system, best outcome, you're out a whole bunch of money, but you're still free. The civil system, best outcome is maybe you don't have a giant damages awarded, but you still have to scrounge up all these fees for your attorneys. And there is a lot of stress involved with being sued, but then we have our worst case scenarios are, what if you are convicted and your sentence, your liberty's deprived, you're sentenced to prison? Well, you're probably not too worried about the civil consequences, but, we see people lose houses, vehicles, and, their retirements. I mean, these things can be extremely costly.
And we see that happen even if you're not acquitted. I mean, this is not a self-defense case, but, the best example of this is O.J. Simpson, right? You can be acquitted on the criminal side and still be convicted on the civil side. So, but I mean, even if you have won everything, you've still lost is the point here, because there's no getting back and making you whole for the years of time, heartache, and money you've had to output to fight these charges.
And I can hear the tip tapping. I can hear the comments saying, well, Richard and Emily are saying you can't defend yourself. And
No.
What do you have to say to that?
No, absolutely not. Judged by 12, carried by 6,
Yep,
right?
I'm sure.
Everybody's
everybody comment just by 12 rather than carried by 6.
No, absolutely. However, I think that really does bring us into our pro tip of the day, which is that, you can't lose a fight that you never get yourself into.
Yeah.
So, self-defense is defensive. Don't be out there looking for a fight. Don't prove a point when you know you've got a pistol on your hip, because even if you are ultimately in the right, it is just, we have clients who ultimately, they were acquitted. Jury found they did the right thing. They still lost everything. This is what we practice self-defense law every single day. I tell people you've got to avoid these interactions if you possibly can.
Yeah, make it a last resort is really a guiding principle. And, you know, and our people, we have probably one of the nicest and smartest audience, I'd say. I'm a YouTube expert and I go hang out all over the place, and y'all are really some of the most insightful and thoughtful people. And so, you know, y'all are all Obi-Wan Kenobi trying to de-escalate and cool things down.
Yeah.
I'm not worried about y'all. And so we are preaching to the choir a little bit here, but and reinforce it, because I know a lot of y'all are instructors, or, you know, reinforce that with your students. You know, de-escalate, avoid, make it a last resort. But we hope you enjoyed this discussion. If you did, consider subscribing, hitting that like button, and leave us a comment. What do you think about, you know, do you have resources available? Are you self-insured if you have to defend yourself? And until next time, I guess we're the armed attorneys.